between the last time, which I think was December that I made a forecast, to now, there's been a number of changes. So on the Democratic side, there's been already two primaries that have already occurred. So there has been the first in the nation primary, which is New Hampshire, and then South Carolina. And in both of those instances, you've seen Biden win against Phillips and Williamson, two other contenders vying for the Democratic nomination. So Biden has gained 55 electoral delegates on the Democratic side to 0 for Phillips and Williamson. On the Republican side, we've seen a more evened out race. Ramaswamy dropped out, as well as DeSantis, and so it's a two-person race right now for the Republican presidential nomination. But in all likelihood, it will be Trump, the one that wins, because he won Iowa, and he's also won. He won Iowa, and he also won New Hampshire. The next contest will be in Nevada, and then South Carolina, which he is slated to win in both of those instances. And later on March 5th, Super Tuesday, which I believe most likely will see him become the presumptive Republican nominee for the presidential election nomination. And in addition to that, I would say he has clinched the nomination. So we know who are the two main candidates going to be. It's a foregone conclusion at this point. We kind of knew 2 years ago. I had predicted that this would happen, and here it is. Like, we are going to have a repeat, for better or for worse, of the 2020 election in the 2024 election cycle. With that being said, before I get to the prediction itself, let me show you some of the polling averages that have occurred, that have transpired up to date. So here are the basically the averages, and this is by 270 to win. I love this website because that's where I get most of my information. But on a national level, this is concerning if you're a Biden supporter, right? Trump is leading by 2.8% on all national polls. I mean, in an electoral college system, that doesn't really matter that much, but it does matter for the electability of Biden. You still have 10% of undecideds, which that generally happens, but this far out, it doesn't bear any significance, right? In Colorado and other states that favor Democrats, you still have Biden up by a considerable amount, so I'm not going to focus on those. Neither am I going to focus on Missouri or South Dakota, because we all know that those are safe Republican states. So I'm going to go ahead and focus on the more competitive ones, and start from there, which leaves us with Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, Arizona, Nevada, Virginia, Colorado, North Carolina, New Hampshire, New Mexico, and Georgia, which would be the most, I guess, arguably the most competitive one. Now, let's start with the Rust Belt. In the Rust Belt, the only one that Biden leads is by 1.6%, and in the 2020 election, he led by a lot more. But this is arguably consistent with his pattern, right? It's a more favorable state to him. It is his home state. So he's leading on that one. On the other ones, you see on the average, and this is an aggregate of polls. So this is not just one single outlier. This is like an aggregate of polls being given to us, right? We have Trump leading by 2.5% in Wisconsin. Not a good sign if you're on the Biden campaign. Michigan, 2.8%. Minnesota, which was a plus 7% state for Biden, is now down to 3%. You have Arizona, which Biden won by less than 1%, go to Trump right now, 4.5%. You have Nevada, a state that Biden, like Democrats, have won consistently for decades, for the past 2 decades, go to go to Trump by 5% on the polling average. Virginia and Colorado are essentially Democratic states. So is North Carolina, more of a Republican-leaning state. But the fact that Trump is up by 7 is concerning if you're the Biden campaign. New Hampshire up by 7. These are not surprising. Alaska, not surprising. Georgia, very surprising. 8% towards the Trump campaign. And so on and so forth. We're not even looking at states like Florida and Ohio. That's lost cause for the Biden campaign. New York, notable, and Illinois. Biden only up by 9%. But one thing to note from these polling averages is the fact that there's so many undecided voters, especially in swing states. Look at Michigan, for example, 15% undecided. Minnesota, 19% undecided. 12% undecided in Pennsylvania. These are more notable, Michigan and Pennsylvania, because it's such a narrow margin of victory in both of these cases. No matter who wins these two states is going to be narrow. So look at the undecided vote will be key come election time. So this is why this far out, the polls are not indicative as to who will win, right? I think at this point in the 2020 election, Biden was, if I'm not mistaken, Trump was leading, and Biden ended up winning the election. Or vice versa, Biden was leading by a wider margin, like 12%, and Trump ended up winning, narrowing down the amount. 16% undecided in Arizona, 9% undecided in Nevada. These are like just big undecided margins, right? Which leads me to believe that those will break one way or the other. There's also the added complexity of a third-party candidate, which could completely upend the race. But so far, we've had the likes of Cornel West only qualify for Alaska. The likes of RFK Jr. only qualify, if I'm not mistaken, in 2 states for the ballot. So he has a lot of money, but he doesn't have the boots on the ground per se that the main 2 parties have, which is why we have a 2-party system. With that being said, I am going to go ahead and categorize how I think the election is most likely to go, right? There are a couple of factors in play which are bringing down Biden's numbers. First of all is the ongoing war in Gaza, which is substantially lowering the favorability ratings for Biden. I mean, he was already low to begin with, but now he's on the modern era, the most unpopular president in this new modern era within the last 40 years, if I'm not mistaken. And that's one. Second, there seems to be a border crisis happening along this area, which, to be honest, I thought wasn't that big of a deal. But the fact that there is quite a considerable amount of people crossing into the border. But to be fair, this has been happening for the past couple of decades anyway. It's just that Congress hasn't passed a meaningful reform to the immigration system in the United States, and that explains that's the main cause behind the problems. And on top of that, in every election cycle, who is the person who is mainly receives the blame is the president, right? Is the most visible one. So it's not really Biden's doing, but he's definitely getting the blame. He's going to get the blame regardless. And in addition to that is the economy, that even though the inflation is quote unquote going down, it's not really going down. What it's doing is it's not going up as high as it used to. That is substantially reducing the purchase power of Americans. So that is also dragging it down, right? And on top of that, you have student loan forgiveness, which has not come into fruition, right? It's happened here and there to some people, the numbers have been touting, but hasn't been something clear and substantial. The bills that were passed in 2022, 2021, at the first half of his presidency have escaped the mainstream interest because their effects are not going to be felt immediately. They're going to be felt more long term. So that's not something that's tangible as, for example, a stimulus check, right? So all of that together creates like a perfect storm against Biden, right? In the case of Trump, yes, he's another greatly unfavored candidate. Like, people don't like Trump either. There's a reason why he didn't win re-election in 2020, right? So this leaves us with one question: who do Americans hate the most, right? Who do American voters hate the most? And whoever they hate the most is the person they are not going to vote for. Right now, it looks like they hate Biden more than Trump. And I'm giving you like a spoiler alert as to who I think is going to win the election, right? In Georgia, I do think that, yes, we had 2 election cycles where Georgia went in favor of Democrats, but this is one I see tilting towards Republicans. I don't see it given the same miracles that it gave recently, right? The same case in Arizona. I still see it going back to it, right? To a certain extent. I don't see how Georgia goes one way and Arizona doesn't go the other way, right? They kind of vote in tandem, in my opinion, since they're in the Sun Belt. There's been a substantial movement towards the right in Nevada, especially amongst Latinos. So I see Nevada shifting towards Trump during this election cycle. And on the Rust Belt, the ones that I see shifting more towards the Biden campaign is more Pennsylvania. Is one that I see still like tilt categorization towards Biden because of there's still, but I'm thinking like Pennsylvania will go by less than 1% in favor of the Biden campaign. And I think the Philly suburbs is what's going to save him, per se. I see Trump winning Wisconsin, which will bring him to the 278 that he needs to win. And I am 50-50 on Michigan, but the fact that he's been so vehemently, he's basically dismissed the Arab community there with his unconditional support of Israel. I do not see. I see Michigan tilting towards Republicans as well. Like, I see enough of a bleed of support from that key constituents in Michigan, like the Arab American community, for it to shift to that side. And this is the result, in my opinion, of the 2024 election cycle. I do see it as a very close race, right? You're not going to have the 306 margin that you have with Biden. I think as of February 2024, I see Trump winning the presidency with 293 electoral votes to Democrats' 245 electoral votes, seeing the re-election of Donald Trump to the election of Donald Trump to a second term. So thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you all on the next one. Bye-bye.